Looking around the room, I couldn't help but smile. Jerry deserved this happiness. He'd had a rough couple of years. I was surprised to be here at all. I called him when I got the invitation. Are you sure about this? He even laughed. Yeah, I'm sure. After all, if it wasn't for you, I never would have found Anna. I'm indebted to you. If any other man had been in your place, I'd be dead or in jail by now. You helped me when the most natural thing in the world would have been to turn away. So I went to his wedding, even sat at the head table, even though he took no part in the ceremony. His new wife hugged me when we met and whispered in my ear. Sign. He told me about your story, but I'd like to hear it from you. I've never heard anything like it. I smiled as I watched them. He was 42, she was 46, but they acted like teenagers to each other. I wished them all the best. I was dancing with the bride when I saw her. I just stopped moving. Anna looked up in confusion and followed my gaze. I tried to break free, but she gripped my arm with a death grip. Calm down. Please don't ruin my wedding. I exhaled noisily, trying to gather my thoughts. What the hell is she doing here? Does Jerry know? If he doesn't know, he's probably going to ruin it. He knows. He did invite her. He says he did it for you. Now calm down and let's finish this dance. We did. I was about to leave, but Jerry was waiting by the table. I looked him straight in the face. I can't believe you invited your ex-wife to your wedding. What the hell got into your head? He shook his head, smiling slightly. I didn't invite her to the wedding, just the reception. And I invited her for you. Anyway, tonight you're going to sit down and talk to her at least for a few minutes. I don't want you to do it for me. I want you to do it for you and for her. Neither of you will ever get over it if you don't. But I gotta tell you, kid, she really loves you. I sat there pondering and agonizing. Jerry and Anna took turns staying with me to make sure I didn't leave. I must have pissed them off with my whining until Anna shrieked. Shut the hell up, please. For a man who went off to war, you're just a wimp when it comes to her. Pull yourself together, talk to her, get it over with, and then walk away if you want to. You're letting us all down. And I want my memories of tonight to not include babysitting a whiny little bitch posing as a big, strong man. And then I realized she was right. Plus, she had gotten me drunk on 4 very strong drinks, and pretty close together. No, she chose that exact moment to appear next to me with tears in her eyes and her hand outstretched. Will you dance with me, please? I could have been an asshole and yelled at her. I could have sat there and ignored her. I could have gotten up and walked away. I took her hand. We walked out onto the dance floor, her achingly familiar body pressed against mine, and we spun slowly to the song the band was playing. I felt her stagger slightly, and I lowered my gaze to see tears falling onto my jacket. I started to pull away, trying to speak. She brought her hand to my lips. Please don't talk. Just hold me. And let me pretend, if only for a moment, that you still love me. That was the crux of my problem. I really did still love her. And we moved slowly across the dance floor, each immersed in our own memories and thoughts. I went over in my mind all the women I thought I loved, including her, and thought about why she had to be the one. The one. The one I wanted. The one I was going to spend the rest of my life with, only to find out she was never mine. That's why it hurt so much. I hugged her and let the memories continue. I saw it coming. I just didn't believe it. He was about 5'7" or 8 tall and weighed less than 50, and he had to be about 40. I was 31, 6'2", 210, mostly muscle. He rushed toward me, his 2 friends trying to hold him back. I was feeling pretty good. It was Thursday. I had just gotten my paycheck, and my girlfriend was supposed to meet me for drinks and dinner, then order dessert. I got up early, had a couple beers while I waited, and chatted with my friends. I didn't know him, had never seen him in my life. He positioned himself right in front of me. I was wondering what he wanted when I saw his hand move. It started somewhere around his knees and gained momentum as he moved. I saw his hand clench into a fist, a movement so slow that I could tell he had probably never made a fist before. I remember thinking that whatever he was hitting must be soft, or he would hurt his hand when it hit my eye. I was so engrossed in watching that it didn't occur to me to defend myself. I fell down, and he started trying to kick me. I hadn't been in the sandbox long enough to let him slip under my protection, but not so long that instinct and training didn't kick in full force. I rolled over and made a leg grab, dropping him to the ground beside me, quickly bringing him into a submissive position. His two buddies tried to jump in, but they were outnumbered and armed, so they enlisted the help of the bartender to help pull me off of him. My cousin was the bartender and owner of the place. He saw this cheap shot and just kept polishing the glass he was holding. I regained my normal breathing and pounced on him. What the hell is going on with you, kid? Do you have some kind of death wish pouncing on strangers half your age and twice your size? I should tie you in a knot and send you home to your wife with bruises and bumps. He continued to struggle. Let me go, you low-life bastard. You need a lesson in how to entertain married women. I stared at him, wondering if he was high or just delusional. Shoving him away, I jumped to my feet. Mister, I'm not trespassing on private property. But if you come back to me, I guarantee you pain. Do you understand me? Apparently he didn't understand, because he got up with a yell and a swing. I hit him with my fist and he dropped like a stone and lay there. I looked at his buddies. Get him out of here. And I think I can say on behalf of management that he needs to drink somewhere else. And tell him that pouncing on younger, stronger, and meaner strangers is a sure way to not live to a ripe old age. They wanted to object, but the bartender interrupted them. Eventually, they took it out, and we laughed for a few minutes until my date showed up. She saw my bruise starting to appear and went into mother mode. What's wrong, dear? I joked. Some guy came over and accused me of sleeping with his wife. He hit me before I could react. Sad, really. He was in his early 40s, short in stature, and had no idea how to fight. But he had nerve. If some guy flirts with his wife, he'd better be on his guard. As I recounted the episode, her face grew paler and paler. I noticed this and tried to reassure her. Calm down, honey. There's nothing wrong with me. But if you feel like kissing him to make it up to him, I won't mind. She immediately covered my face with light kisses and then pulled away with a smile. There you go. Mom made everything better. No mean old man can hit my sweetheart. He'd have to be a very big man to attack you. Didn't he notice all those fine muscles? She cooed, rubbing my bicep. I found out later that she just wanted me to describe him again. He was actually older than me, short in stature, with a small tummy. He didn't have any skills, but he had a lot of chutzpah. If his wife is cheating on him, things could get really bad if he finds this guy. Melody was silent again, and then excused herself to the restroom, saying she wasn't feeling well. My cousin Bob, the bartender, heard almost the entire conversation. There's always the quiet ones, you know. He was probably living his version of the American dream, happy as a clam. And then he found out his wife was a whore. That's who you have to watch out for. Those who can kill you in a fit of rage. I've seen it to one degree or another hundreds of times or more. I hope you got enough of him to let him leave you alone. I nodded, agreeing completely. I hope he finds the bastard and kicks his ass. I've seen a few people fail in the service after getting letters from Dear John. Still, he'd better get his facts straight and be careful he's not much for fighting. Melody reappeared, looking sad. Sorry, honey, the hospital called. There was a big accident on the highway and they're short-staffed. They've been begging, so I'm going to have to go there. I'll call tomorrow if I'm not too tired. Love you. She kissed me on the cheek and walked out. This had happened before, as she was a trauma nurse at the local hospital. Luckily for me, she worked a 12-hour shift for the first half of the week, so she was free Thursday through Saturday. I, on the other hand, was working out of town, and a lot of it. No, I don't have a high-paying executive job where I fly around the country solving problems for megacorporations or saving the world for the government. I'm laying stone on, that's right, rock. Big rocks, you know? My dad was the guy I was just talking about. He was flying around the country and sometimes the world, making his company big money. He was almost never around, so my mom raised my sister and me practically alone. And in my opinion, she did it pretty damn well. When I was 12, my father decided he didn't need a middle-aged, middle-class housewife and traded her in for a newer model. She was heartbroken, but my grandfather, who never liked him, was furious. My father tried to expedite the divorce by depriving him of his medical funds. My father intervened, spent his own money, found her the second-best divorce attorney in the state only because the first one was too busy, and burned him to the ground. My father fought until he threatened to sue his company for violating the morals clause. His new woman was his assistant for a while. When he saw his meteoric career threatened, he curled up like a cheap tent and Mom left, fragrant as a rose, albeit heartbroken. Dad moved to the other coast, and we hardly saw each other until he came to my high school graduation and offered me admission to one of the best colleges on the West Coast if I agreed to move. I politely declined until he insisted, at which point I cursed loudly and physically kicked him out of our house. I never saw him again from then on. My mom remarried to a decent man who loved her very much. Amazingly, she became pregnant, and at the age of 15, I became a brother. I admired the man, and my sister idolized him. He offered to help pay for college, but didn't insist when I decided not to continue my education. Instead, I became part of the big green machine and spent 4 years in the service, a year each, in both sandboxes. By the time I got out, I had a better understanding of how the world worked and went to school on military pay while working for my grandfather. You guessed it, he was a master stonemason and had been doing it all his life. Even at 62, he had a body that 30-year-old gym rats would kill for. My dad couldn't leave fast enough, but I was old enough to pick up a rock. Dad would stack a bunch in the backyard of his house and reward me depending on how fast I picked them up. Sometimes I picked them up in ways he didn't want me to, but by the time I was 13, they were always on top. At 14, I became his apprentice, working summers and after school if he worked close to home. There was no shortage of stones in Afghanistan, especially in the unit I served in, and I amused myself by building walls, especially around our positions. When the wall I built saved several lives, including that of our captain, the guys soon became my helpers. We always had the best fortified positions in the area. The Afghans were excellent masons, and I learned their methods, sometimes working with them to build schools and hospitals. I learned everything I could from them. My father took me into the business as soon as I got out of prison. Soon I was doing all the work for him, usually just me and one or two helpers. The big jobs he usually handled himself. One of the worst days of my life came when he passed away, victimized by a texting child. He was crossing the road and hit Pope head-on. They estimate he was traveling at a speed of 65 at the time of the collision. Pope was in his 66-year-old Ford pickup truck with no airbags or head restraints. His neck was broken, and doctors say he likely died instantly. No matter how he died, he was gone at the age of 66. He was going to retire as soon as he finished his current job. He and his grandmother had bought an SUV intending to travel the country. Due to his impending retirement, he gradually transferred the company into my name so I wouldn't have to mess around with a bunch of paperwork. I was 27. Bricklayer is a fascinating profession. A master mason can make a lot of money, depending on the type of work. My company specialized in building and rebuilding drywalls, walls built without mortar, depending on the size and placement of the stones to keep their shape. This skill is not easy to learn, and we were the best in the region. Before he died, my grandfather made arrangements with the state university system to repair walls on the 5 oldest campuses. Some of them were over 300 years old and had fallen into disrepair or collapsed completely. I had a crew of 2 master masons and 3 or 4 journeymen at each site. We paid the journeymen from $15 to $20 an hour, depending on their skill level. As they progressed, their wages increased. Of course, it took years to become a master, but as I said, the pay was excellent. And there was some question as to whether I could fulfill the contract, but I convinced them to believe in me. Look, the Pope was practically an administrator before he passed away. The same masons with the same skills are still working. I guarantee the work won't suffer. They ended up keeping us, mostly because the company was in my name by then, and they'd never complained before and knew it would be hard to replace us. Bricklayers are rare, and really good bricklayers are even rarer. I hated being the manager, not being able to lay stone on a regular basis. I solved that problem by hiring my sister Becky. She could lay stone pretty well and could spot shoddy work a mile away. She had just graduated with a business degree, and there weren't many good jobs available, so she took the job for the experience, if not more. We still had to have meetings and check the books, which we planned to do along with weekly family dinners. My stepfather Jerry was an accountant, and Dad liked him so much that he gave him our business when he married Mom. Grandma was always there for him, and she and Mom would engage in discussions based on years of experience. My younger brother Jerry Jr. was 15, and I had already promised him a job for the next summer. He would start at the bottom, grinding stone like all the apprentices. He had an amazing aptitude for math, and I was sure he wouldn't become a Freemason. But that didn't matter. Accountants were valuable people too. I was 30 years old when I met Melody. One Thursday night, she came to a bar with some friends. We both felt an instant attraction, almost lust at first sight. Billy, my cousin and the owner of the bar, played with live bands on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday nights. It was a blue-collar establishment, so they played mostly country music, and some of it was even good. I watched Mel dance a few quick numbers and admired her grace. She walked up to the bar just as the band started a slow song and ordered a portion for her table. When the music started, she grabbed my hand. "I don't want to waste a good slow song, and yes, I'd love to dance with you. Thank you for asking." I was so surprised I couldn't even speak and stumbled after her, and my friends laughed. The slow dance with Mel was supposed to be mandatory for the graduating class to show how things should be. Of course, if that had happened, there would have been a lot of wet spots on a lot of jeans. This woman just pressed herself against you, leaving no space between you, moving with you so gracefully that it felt like you were alone, except for the extremely pleasant warmth and feel of her body. I think I fell in love with her before the first song was even over. She was tall, about 5'9", and in her 5-inch heels she could look me in the eye. When the dance was over, she didn't let go of my hand and pulled me to her table. I met her friends, but I still can't tell you their names. The band stopped 45 minutes before closing time, and we were able to talk without yelling. Her friends were tired of waiting and were urging her to go home. "Damn it, Mel, kiss the guy. You know you want to. Get his number and let's go," one of her friends said, and she did. The first kiss with someone you like is never forgotten. "Will you be here tomorrow?" she asked, pulling away. I just nodded. "Meet me out front at 7:30. Take me somewhere nice for dinner. Bye." And she left, leaving traces of her perfume on my body and the taste of her lips on mine. I got up and wandered back to the bar where a damn attractive guy was waiting for me. "Not a bad game, Bandit," Billy laughed. "If she held out a hoop, I think you'd jump through it." I got that nickname because my real name was Jesse James. It was chosen by my father, saying he admired his Robin Hood image. One day I found some information about him. Many historians recognize him as the first sociopathic criminal in American history. I didn't care why. I didn't care how. I cared that she chose me. But I was incredibly wary. You see, I didn't have the best track record with women. I'd had 2 serious affairs after high school. The first ended when she bluntly told me she wasn't going to wait for me while I was in the service. "I'm 19. You may not come back. I don't want such an uncertain future. I really care about you, and if I'm still single when you come back, maybe we can start over." I didn't like it, but I understood. We met again when I got home, but we had both changed and the magic was gone. We realized this pretty early on and parted as friends. The second one I met in college. She was the star of the volleyball team. Tall, muscular, attractive, and the most arrogant woman I had ever met. Someone once told her she was special, and she believed it for the rest of her life. The volleyball team won the national championship several times at a school where the basketball and football programs just sucked. This made her the queen bee, and the staff and students obediently followed her every whim. Everyone in town knew who Cindy Tolliver was. I wasn't a troll either. 6'1", thanks to military training and work, I was as hard as the rocks I lay on and even had impressive abs. Not that I ever took my shirt off except on the job. Sandy brown hair with hints of red due to being outdoors a lot, and blue eyes that were so pale they looked gray. I also had a perpetual tan due to being outdoors a lot. The beauty of drywall construction is that it can be done even in cold weather because you don't have to worry about the mortar setting properly. So we worked all year round unless the ground froze so deep that we couldn't lay the stone properly. I did most of my training in the winter. Cindy was so used to getting her way that it shocked her when someone turned her down. It just so happened that I was the one who said no that day. We were at a popular bar and grill near campus. The food was delicious, the prices were reasonable, and the place was very crowded during happy hour. I sat at a large table by myself. Everyone else was busy with the crowd. They had really good food, and I was halfway through a great cheeseburger when she and her entourage walked in. 2 more women and 4 guys. Looking around, she soon discovered that the only available table belonged to me. She approached me. "My friends and I need a table, and you only have one free. Would you mind giving it up so we can sit down?" She smiled falsely, assuming I'd be happy to disappear for her pleasure. Yes, I said with a smile, continuing to eat. She assumed that yes meant I would leave, but yes meant I was okay with it, so I continued eating. After a minute or two, she snorted. Are you going to leave or what? We're waiting. When I'm done or a smaller table becomes available, I'll gladly give it up. Or, since I have so much room, you can all join me. You can go stand at the bar, one of the guys said loudly, pouting slightly. I smirked. Boy, don't you know that standing while you eat will make your legs even bigger? I'm already having a hard enough time finding a decent 14-year-old girl. Don't make a big deal out of it. Maybe I should make you leave, he growled. He looked about 5'10" and was in pretty good shape, but his posture and attitude said he didn't know how to do anything. I stared at him for a minute, then took a big sip of tea, ate a few fries, and sighed. Okay, I see three possible outcomes. One, you kick my ass and people think you're a jerk because you got into a fight with someone minding their own business. Two, I'll beat the dog shit out of you in front of your friends and everyone will think you deserved it because you were a first-class asshole. Or three, you can leave me alone while I finish the last two bites and I'll leave. Why don't you leave your friends to sit around while you go order drinks? I'll be gone by then. He pouted. Cindy watched this exchange with amazement. She held up her hand. Stop it, Brian. I think this could end badly for you if you don't. Do as he said, order us drinks. We'll be around if this gentleman wants to share. I'd had enough by then. I stood up, pushing back the chair for the girl closest to me. Please take a table, I'm already done anyway. Have a nice evening. I reached for the speaker next to the table and pulled out my cane. My leg was in a cast, the result of one overly energetic student trying to show off in front of me. He ended up dropping a 65-pound rock on my foot, breaking two bones. That's why I needed a table. I couldn't stand at the bar. Her eyes widened. Please stay, and let us buy you a beer. Thank you for the offer, but I have to decline. I can't drink right now because it might interfere with my medication. Brian came back, saw the cast, and smirked. I realized he thought I was going to be easy. Sure enough, he followed me to the car. You think the cast will save you? It will only make it easier. I will. I'd heard enough, so I turned, wrinkling my nose at the sudden movement, and drove the point of my cane right into the soft tissue above his groin. He dropped like a stone, making a sound like a deflating balloon, and wet himself. I turned back to my truck. Don't get up until I pull out of the parking lot. If you do, I'll think you're going to hurt me, and you won't like my answer. Grow up before you get grabbed by someone not as patient as me. He was still lying there when I went outside. I didn't know it, but Cindy and her friends noticed his absence and came out to rescue me. They managed to witness our little conversation. They picked Brian up, dusted him off, and Cindy started pestering everyone in the restaurant to find out about me. Cindy took the trouble to find me. She didn't have much luck because I was in mostly night classes and didn't socialize with the university crowd. I was older, much more mature, and focused on ministry rather than college life. Eventually, she tracked me down, stalking the bar and grill. When I walked in, she stood up and pointed to an empty chair. Great, you're here. I made room for you. She pointed to the only empty chair at the table. I looked around the room. There were other empty seats, and I was about to head towards one of them when she put her hand on my shoulder. Please, she said, not using the word often, just for a moment. We owe you an apology. Brian was an idiot, and that's one of the many reasons he doesn't hang out with us anymore. And I thought I caught the sincerity in her voice, and I sat down. To my surprise, I discovered that she and her friends were no fools. One was studying political science and had received a lucrative offer from a lobbying group upon graduation. Another was preparing to attend Yale University, and a third was going to work for her father after getting her MBA from Wharton. Cindy was majoring in sports psychology, a degree that would come in handy after her career as a professional volleyball player was over. It was fun to watch as they fought off fans discussing the profitability of new sports in the context of their future, and occasionally asked for my opinion. If I could, I answered their questions. If I couldn't, I talked about it. I told them I was too busy with my business to follow many sports, especially the new extreme sports. This led to questions about my job, especially from a business professional. Wow, you're talking about a niche market. Is that good money? What is your business plan? What part of the market do you control? I raised my hand to stop her. It's great money. I may never be rich, but I'll be very comfortable. My advertising goes by word of mouth, and my work isn't affordable for everyone. I work with multi-million-dollar properties most of the time. Right now, I have two big projects for real estate developers, plus a restoration contract for the state college system. I've been working with the crews I have now for almost 2 years, and tomorrow I'm flying out to negotiate with colleges in 2 states to do for them what I'm doing here. With the crews I have now, that will add another 2 or 3 years of work. I will probably interview and hire local masons to start the project on time. Even when the economy went south, and I usually work for the rich, I still had a steady job. Everyone sat back amazed. Becca, majoring in business, spoke first. I'm just writing a paper on the viability of niche businesses. I think I'll dig through everything I already have and write a paper just about your business if you'll let me. Please. I thought for a second and grinned. Sure, it would be extra free publicity for the business. Just keep in mind that most of the work is done in the field, so you may have to travel if you want an in-depth analysis. She grinned. Not a problem. One of the perks of having rich parents is free money, especially if I tell them it's school-related. Cindy frowned at the thought of following me around, but prudently said nothing at that moment. I found out later that she tried to talk her out of it. Becca refused. It's a good opportunity, CYN. The report will look good on my Wharton application, and I don't plan on dating him. She smirked slightly before continuing. What he's planning is another matter entirely. Let's face it, she was a beautiful, determined woman, used to getting her way. I was more calm and non-confrontational, inclined to go along unless it conflicted with my values. The inevitable happened and we connected, beginning a fairly intense 2-year relationship. I led her on, realizing early on that the only way to keep things fair was to get her off balance. If she got too comfortable, her my way or else would come out. I explained to her, you may be the queen at school, but to me you're just another girl. You're beautiful and I'm attracted to you, but I'll never be your slut. I look at a serious relationship as a partnership with pros and cons. Everyone has strengths and weaknesses. In an ideal relationship, the weaknesses and strengths should balance each other out, and each partner should take the lead from time to time. Do you understand? She smiled at me, half smirking. Oh, I do understand, and I intend to be your queen before we're done, just as you will be my king. Those were the words I needed to hear, and for 18 months I'd climb the mountain, only to discover there was nothing but sheer rock at the top. I think she would have been willing to sleep with him on the first date if I had pushed her, but I made her wait, which was part of my plan to get her off balance. We escalated to manhandling, but I always stopped, which really upset her. Eventually, she got fed up with it. One night when I got her to the brink and stopped, she exploded. Damn it, Bandit. It's time to man up and take care of me. What's the matter? Don't you think I'm a good fit? I can give you some references. Or are you afraid you won't be man enough to give me pleasure? Don't worry, baby. I'm ready to train you the way I like. I think she realized she was overreacting, judging by the look on her face. She started to try to apologize, but I interrupted her. Don't worry about it, CYN. I've already had several of your acquaintances describe to me in great detail how skilled you are. I'm not as experienced as you, but I've never had any complaints. It's very kind of you to offer to share your experience with me. Just like in volleyball, the more you practice, the better you play. And we already know how good you are at it. I paused, thinking I might have gone a little overboard with the experience part. And as kind as your offer is, I think I'll decline. I bid you good night. She begged and pleaded as I left her apartment, and even tried to physically stop me. She was a big girl, strong, but I had been lifting a rock for too many years, and I easily broke her grip. I didn't see her for 2 weeks despite her calls, texts, and emails. It just so happened that I had a deadline and still had to work weekends. Her last 2 emails were pretty nasty. She wasn't used to rejection and didn't handle it well. Back in town, I met Becca, a business school student, and Carol, her friend from law school, at a grill bar. I was sitting alone when they approached my table. Carol smiled broadly. So is it true that Cindy dumped you? Becca saw my face tense up and giggled. Look at the look on his face, Carol. I bet if the truth be told, he dumped her. Didn't he, Jess? I adopted an indifferent expression on my face. I'd say it was a mutual breakup, Let's just say our ideas about the relationship were too divergent. Huh, she said. I guess she told you to jump and you explained that you didn't like hoops. Whatever it was, it shook her up pretty badly. Ever since you disappeared, she's been a screaming bitch. Coach threatened to bench her if she didn't pull her head out of her ass. Oh well, let her talk to the devil. At that moment, Cindy walked in with a basketball in her hands. She looked at us sitting together and snapped. Leaving the basketball in the dust, she stormed over to us. He walked behind her, trying to take her hand. For the second time, she growled at him. Let go of me. What part of being just friends don't you understand? The look on his face told me she didn't mean exactly that. What the hell, CYN? Why are you so hung up on that redneck? He was already stupid enough to dump your ass one day. He's a loser. I bet he'll never be able to support you the way you deserve, like I do. Becca nearly fell off her chair with laughter. What was it Bugs Bunny used to say? Oh yeah, what an asshole. You haven't even graduated yet, and your chances of getting into the pros are slim at best. Depending on your specialty, it could be years before you make decent money. Jesse now owns his own successful business and has for many years. His income is over 6 figures, and that number grows every year. Not bad for a redneck, eh, Dustin? He was about to angrily object when Carol interjected into the conversation. Dustin, whatever you're thinking, stop. Look at him. He didn't gain those muscles at the gym. Besides, he's been in combat twice, so he knows how to wound and kill people. He probably wouldn't have a problem taking you apart and putting you back together a foot shorter. Maybe you want to sit at the bar while he and CYN talk. Come on, Becca and I will keep you company. They pathetically walked him out. CYN sat down and just stared at me for about 3 minutes before he spoke. The worst part is when people spoil you. It works. I know I'm arrogant and a total control freak. I know I can't stand being told no. But Jess, I'm a good person. I'm in college, hell. You know I can learn. Why don't we start over? I sat back and pondered. She was the kind of person who didn't know how to appreciate silence, so she started again. I regret that night. I was brainwashed into thinking I was a great gift and should be appreciated. I know I'm just a girl. A beautiful girl, but there are plenty of prettier, better built, smarter, and more understanding girls around. Becca and Carol, for example. They've made no secret of the fact that if this works out, they're interested. But they'll never love you the way I do, Jess. They'll never melt the way I melt when you touch them. If you want to wait, I'll wait. You set the pace. I'll follow your lead. 4 months later, she wanted to see where we were going. They didn't win nationals that year. She blamed it on me, saying I was distracting her with extra workouts and keeping her energy level low. She was just finishing up high school and got a very tempting offer to join a seasoned pro in beach volleyball. The pay wasn't bad, but as she explained, the money was made more from advertising, personal appearances, and television. She wanted to work for 3 years to save enough money to continue her studies and get her PhD. After several long conversations, we decided the smart thing to do was to get married. She swooned when I popped the question and gave her a ring. No, we decided to hold off on the wedding until after her first year of employment. I hoped that by then she would get bored with everything and leave to focus on her studies. I could afford to pay for her. She was from a single-parent family and her father couldn't afford to help her. We spent a glorious month together. She traveled with me from job to job, familiarized herself with the cities we visited while I worked, and then focused on keeping me exhausted and weak every night. For the first time in my life, I was struggling to lift large rocks. My team chuckled and told me that if I didn't exercise after work, I would regain my strength. That's why I pay you assholes to lift weights. There's no way I'm giving up my exercise program. Now get those rocks over here. When she walked away, I felt defeated. She clung to me and cried like a baby. I had to almost pull her away from me so she could get on the airplane. It was really hard because I didn't want her to go. If you don't like it, honey, come home. You know I have money for your tuition, so you don't have to worry. She sighed and hugged me tighter. All my life, people have taken care of me. My father, then school, now you. For once, I need to prove that I can take care of myself on my own. Besides, I signed a contract. I must perform this season. I didn't like it, but I understood. The first year was hard for both of us. She was performing very well. She and her partner were at the top of the standings. They were winning more and more. Their money was growing. I watched it on TV, and I didn't like the thong they were wearing at all. It's spelled out in the contract, honey. The manufacturer offered us an ad campaign because of our popularity. It's a good number, honey. You don't mind, do you? How could I not support her? It was taking up our time, but we were getting by. It got to the point where we only met once a month for 3 days. I was counting the days until the end of the season. She'd come home and we'd try to catch up. Mom hinted at grandchildren. It seemed like my sister and I had something in common. We both liked girls. That explained why she hung out with us so often. She wanted to hook up with one of Cindy's friends. She had a couple teammates. Beck managed to hook up with one of them once, but they broke up because neither of them wanted to start a relationship. Eventually, she found a nice, quiet girl and they got married. In addition to nagging me, after my mom came to terms with Becky's choice, she started hinting to her that they should either adopt a child or do artificial insemination. They were considering that option. After 4 glorious weeks, she grew sad. I put up with as much as I could before facing her. What's going on, CYN? Don't try to brush me off. We're going to sit here until you tell me. She was quiet for a bit before telling me. I signed a contract for another season. They doubled our money and the exhibit is worth a lot more. I'm sorry, honey, but I have to do this for me. Please don't be angry. I wasn't angry, I was furious. We bickered most of the time until she left. Why can't you be more gracious? Just this year, I swear to you. I've been supportive of you. All last year. You made promises then, remember? So much for your word when it comes to money. Wrong word! She broke out into a scream. I was only half listening to her, and after about 10 minutes, she realized I wasn't hanging on to every word. She stopped immediately. In a quiet voice, she repeated the attempt. I think I've earned it. Tell you what, I'll write a contract. If I don't stop next year, the marriage is off. Please, Bandit. It really means a lot to me. I just looked at her. You don't need a contract. If you don't stop next year, I'm out. Do you understand? She went a little pale and made a bunch of promises. Promises she didn't keep. At the beginning of the next year, things got even better for them. Her partner, Jen, called and thanked me for letting her play. Said, this is my last year on tour, so if she doesn't find a new partner, she'll leave too. I plan to teach. I've already found jobs as a high school math teacher and volleyball coach in a small town in California. I've always loved beach vacations. Maybe I'll find a nice quiet guy and get married again. But if we had a relationship like yours, maybe I'd still be married. I didn't know she was divorced. I knew she was married and that he didn't like her absence. When Cindy told me this, I threw her a reproachful look. She took the hint and fell silent. What agreement, Jen? The way I said it made her pause. You know, about your understanding. I let the silence linger and she got nervous. I'm sorry, I didn't make myself clear. I didn't mean understanding, I meant your understanding. She's very lucky to have you. I have to go now. Watch us on TV. The whole conversation made me a little uncomfortable. The first time she was home, I asked her about it. Don't worry about it, honey. She's been a little scatterbrained since the divorce. I think it's hurt her more than she wants to admit. Trust me, I won't make the mistakes she did. I love you too much. When I asked what those mistakes were, she took some offense. I pressed her, and she finally admitted that she had an affair with one of the men on the tour, and her husband found out. You have my word, darling. I will never hurt you like that. I have too much to lose. She usually called every Monday and Tuesday, but I never heard from her even though I called and left 6 emails. The next week I answered her in the same vein, not picking up the phone once out of the 10 times she called. The following week she came home unscheduled and furious. After she went on a tirade about me not answering, I told her I was just following her lead. We were both furious, but it ended with me telling her to shove her Spanish boyfriend wherever she wanted. She turned so pale I thought she was going to pass out. By then, I had already exhausted my limit of communication with her, so I got up and left. 2 days later, she sought me out at the construction site and begged me on her knees to let her talk. CYN had been telling me for 2 days that there was nothing there, and if I was so unhappy, she would never advertise again. She swore on everything she could think of that she would leave for good when the season was over. In hindsight, you could say she was reading from a script, but they were the right words at the right time, and I believed her. She did 2 more shoots, and both times with a golfer. It started with me needing tires for my truck, so I went to the dealer in the town where I worked. It took over an hour, and I headed across the street for lunch. After lunch, I had to wait another 10 minutes for them to finish, and I looked at the magazines, flipping through them carelessly. My interest was piqued by a golf magazine from 2 weeks ago. There was a profile of Juan Pablo, showing him on and off the course. In the picture that caught my eye, he was sitting in the bleachers watching a game of beach volleyball and then kissing one of the winning players. The article quoted him saying that he traveled to every competition his schedule allowed to support his girlfriend. You guessed it, the player was Cindy. I was furious. I purposely skipped her calls and flew to her next match. She and Jan always shared a room, and I got there around 7. Jan opened the door and turned pale when she saw me. Cindy wasn't there. I called her in Jan's presence. She was glad to hear me. Hi, honey. Where have you been? I was beginning to worry that you had replaced me. I could never replace you, darling. Did I catch you at dinner? I heard a noise in the background. Yes, Jan and I are in the hotel dining room. The food is very good. I managed to chat with her for a few minutes while Jan grew increasingly pale. I hung up the phone and smiled at Jan. Jan, did I ever tell you I was in the army? I spent 2 years in the desert killing people as often as I could. I won't kill you, Jan, but if I don't get the truth out of you now, I'll break your wrists and knees. You'll live, but you'll never be able to walk or use your arms like you used to. No one wants a crippled volleyball player or coach. I'll definitely go to jail, but not before I get to Cindy and her Latin lover. The choice is yours, but if you take the easy way out, now is the time to start. Would I have done it? No, but at that moment I was very angry. John must have thought I was being serious, judging by the astonished look on her face. She was talking so fast I had to make her slow down. It started at the end of the first season. Not with him, but with another volleyball player. No love, she said, just relieved tension. She admitted she used to do the same thing until her husband caught her. She pleaded, but the deed was done and he divorced her. At her first photo shoot, Cindy hit it off with Juan, but apparently the skin rubbing against each other proved too much. She told me you were okay with it, Jess. Said you were doing the same thing. Said you've come to an agreement. She's free to satisfy her desires and you do the same while you're traveling for work. She also told me it would be over when the season was over, and kept talking about how happy she would be when you were married. She hung her head, saying she now knew there was no agreement. Where is she now? Her eyes grew huge. Please, Jess, let me call her and get her back here so you can talk. I'm sure you can work things out. Tell me right now, or you'll have at least a broken elbow added to your injuries. I stood up, and she recoiled back in horror. They're at his hotel across town. He's playing in a tournament here. No. She gave me the room number, telling me they might not be there. They might be at the dance. I grabbed her by the throat and pushed her against the wall, pressing my face against hers. If you warn her, I'll come back and get more angry. Do we understand each other? She peed her pants at the end and nodded so fast I was afraid she'd hurt herself. I stood in the lobby and watched as they walked hand in hand to the room and headed for the elevator. I had the room number and could have waited, but I knew what they were doing, so I didn't see the point in waiting for them to undress. I gave them 3 minutes and kicked the door open. She looked back, recognized me, and almost fainted. He was so drunk he was trying to act macho. I quickly stopped him by turning him toward me and blocking his arm. Don't move, bastard. If you resist, it's going to be bad. Do you understand me? Good. Now tell me how long you've been having fun, and if you lie, I'll know. 3, maybe 4 months. That doesn't mean anything, man. Calm down. So you partied that long knowing she was engaged, and you thought it was okay. I read that you got engaged and she's expecting you in Spain. I wonder if she'll think it's nothing. Let's call her and find out. He was begging now. Cindy put the bed between us and put the dress back on. She still didn't say a word. I realized I didn't have much time. There were people in the hallway, and I was not known for being calm. I let go of her, and he stood up. I hit him. Try swinging that baton now, you bastard. He collapsed to the floor, and I looked at Cindy. Keep the ring. It doesn't matter to me anymore. Come back when you get up the courage, and I'll pack your things. Don't try to talk. We have nothing to say to each other, nothing more. I walked out the door, took the elevator downstairs, and called for the manager. I apologized, said I was always clumsy and fell through the door of room 418, explained that my girlfriend and I were going to visit and he was standing outside the door and could have gotten hurt. I gave him my credit card number, saying I'd be happy to pay for the repairs and any medical bills. He wanted me to stay, but I told him I really needed to catch a plane and he could call if he needed me. He could just ask for my number from a friend. I found out the next day when I watched a small part of a tournament he was in. The announcers made a big deal out of it, saying he might live to see the end of the season, explaining that it was just an accident among friends. The rumor mill in both sports immediately kicked into gear, and he used his injury as an excuse to fly home. The next season, the announcers discussed his new single status. I didn't say a word to anyone, but many other golfers and announcers were staying in the same hotel, and it was impossible to keep quiet. Jan and Cindy played the next 3 games poorly, losing consecutive games each time. At the end of the season, Jan actually retired, and Cindy signed with a new partner fresh out of college. She played 4 more seasons before quitting and getting her PhD. For about 3 months, she tried to get me to talk to her, telling my mom that she was flying in and we would talk even if she had to force me. My mom laughed and told her off, but she never flew over. That was it. Not very original. The same thing probably happens hundreds of thousands of times a day all over the world. But my world was shattered. For 2 years, I had a deep distrust when dealing with a woman. Then I met Melody, and light came back into my life. As I mentioned, she worked as a trauma nurse at a local hospital. 12-hour shifts on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, and on-call every other week. I thought it was fate because all she did was work, and I was usually out of town for at least 4 days, so our free time usually overlapped. We got off to a slow start, a few dinners out, dancing at better clubs than the bar where we met. We watched a few movies with the girls, went to a museum, a baseball game. She was up for anything. But then again, it was only a matter of time before she would look into those big, beautiful eyes, and I would fall to the ground trying to please her. We never saw each other on the days she worked, although she always called me when she had a break. She lived with 2 other nurses, and they said they agreed never to bring their boyfriends home. One of us is always working and the other is usually asleep, so we keep you away so you don't get distracted. Plus, last year, before we made the rules, one of them stole a guy while the other was sleeping. I had to replace them both. So no boyfriends, baby. Rules are rules. We were together almost from the time I got home from work until she needed to go home to get ready for work. I got tired of renting rooms in motels, so I advertised. I had a lot of people I knew in my business. So when I asked people to look out for a house with at least 3 bedrooms and a large lot, I got a good dose of ridicule. Finally, someone's got you figured out, haven't they? Good for you. It was a pretty common theme. I would just smile and show them the picture. Then the comments would boil down to the phrase, lucky bastard. One interior designer judged me. Idiot. Don't you know that 99% of the time it's the woman who chooses the house? Maybe you should keep her in the loop. I took her advice and, armed with inside information about houses in disrepair or homeowners wanting to get rid of one due to the economy or divorce, went looking. Under the pretense that I wanted to spend as much time with her as possible and needed a woman's perspective, I took her along. She wasn't impressed with the first 5 houses, but on the second weekend we walked into a 4-bedroom house on 3 acres on the outskirts of town. She walked through the house, touched the appliances. She really liked the large kitchen. She liked the layout where the bedroom was on one side of the house, away from the rest of the house, allowing for privacy. We walked around all 3 acres, found a small spring, and she touched some large trees. What are you thinking about? Mel looked at me with misty eyes. About tree houses. The next week, I took the next week off and started the paperwork. I got a really favorable offer. They had just started the foreclosure process and were happy to avoid the process. That week, the owner left the house, traveling to parts unknown. On Friday, we went back to the house again. We took another look at it. I asked her if she could be happy living here. I'm sure I'd love it. Why the question? Because we bought it on Monday. I need you to pick out some new furniture. Is that okay with you? Before she could answer, I dropped to my knee. I hope you like this house. I intend to live in it for a long time. A long time with you by my side. I'd like to have to use 1 or 2 bedrooms someday. All you have to do is say yes. I held out the ring. A traditional, simple ring with a stone on top. She surprised me by fainting on the kitchen counter. Melody recovered quickly. There were tears in her eyes. I didn't get the response I was expecting. I love you, Jesse, but I can't marry you right now. I'm begging you to give me time. I have some things to do before I accept your proposal. Please, and I'm begging you for this. Give me 6 months and ask again. I promise the wait will be worth it if you agree. This was not the answer I expected, and I was terribly disappointed. She tried her best to reassure me, to the point of sending me to the store the next day to buy furniture. She had no preference, just as long as it was sturdy. We bought a bedroom with a California king bed, a sectional sofa, an armchair, and a rocking chair for the living room. I looked at her as she sat down in the rocking chair. She grinned. This might come in handy in a year or two. That simple statement filled me with hope. I gave her a credit card and told her to buy whatever she saw fit. I took Melody to meet the family. Mom and Becky liked her right away. Grandma wasn't as thrilled. My little brother practically drooled over her, and my stepfather only smirked. I took that as a good sign. I arrived the following Friday and went straight to the new house. She had made a beautiful dining room and set up a guest room. Her car was parked outside, but I didn't see her. I found her, splendidly naked on the California king bed. She slid off the bed and reached for me. I was going to start without you. I want to christen every piece of furniture, every foot of space in our new home. Next weekend, we'll do the yard. I tried, really tried, but all we accomplished that weekend was a bedroom and a dining room table. She laughed, saying she would take pity on me and we would tackle the guest room and living room the following week. And then the next weekend, I was sitting at the bar waiting for her, happier than I'd ever been in my life, when a guy walked in and punched me. When she left, I had a few more drinks with friends and headed to my new home early in the morning to wait for the love of my life. As I was walking to my car, 2 gunshots rang out. They hit the car in 2 places. However, they were close enough to scare me to death. Instinct kicked in, and I fell and rolled behind the SUV. I heard a guy approaching, crying and cursing, peering between the cars. I rolled under the SUV, jumped out, and crouching ran toward the next line of cars. Get out of here, bastard. I'll make sure you never mess up another husband. His voice shook with rage, and I realized he was pretty drunk, judging by the slurred speech. I got a good look at him as he passed under a streetlight in the parking lot. This was the same guy who hit me, and I realized it wasn't an accident. He was stalking me. My stepfather used to say, "Never leave a live snake behind you." So I lay low and waited. He was almost level with my hiding place and looking the other way, so I carefully placed my shoe behind him, which slipped off my foot. The slight noise made him flinch, and as soon as he turned away, I was at his side. I grabbed his hand, which had the gun in it, and yanked him back hard. The pressure made him release the gun, and after that I beat the shit out of him. Realizing that if I didn't stop, I was going to destroy him, I let him go and stood up. He was cold, so I picked him up, threw him in the back of the truck and drove off, eventually ending up in front of an abandoned barn in the middle of nowhere. He was starting to regain consciousness when I lowered the back door and pulled him out by his feet, listening to his head hit the gravel as he fell. It knocked him out again. He came to his senses when I splashed some water in his face that was in the cooler in the back of the truck. He turned his head, and his eyes widened in horror when he realized he wasn't moving. I didn't intend to destroy him, but I wanted to scare him to death. A .32. Really, you can only piss people off with a weapon like that. I know it did me good. Now I'm going to talk and you'll listen and nod your head. When I'm done, you can talk, and it better be good because right now I have the urge to shove this bullet up your ass all the way. Now is the time to talk. I had to hand it to him. He was helpless, but he was still looking at me. What do you want me to say? I'm okay with you entertaining my wife? That's never going to happen. Sooner or later, you'll stop looking and I'll get justice. Better destroy me now. I looked down at him. He should have been terrified, but he wasn't backing down. I even admired him. I grabbed him, put him in the back seat, and holding him by the front of his shirt, began methodically slapping him. I'm not entertaining anyone's wife. What can I do to get you to leave me alone? The humor in this situation disappeared very quickly. Back pocket, he sighed. Take out my wallet. Tell me that's not Melody in the picture. If it isn't, I'll apologize and you can do whatever you want to me. I can't describe how I felt when he said her name. Denial raged in my head as I pulled out my wallet, already knowing what I'd find there. It was her, younger, slightly thinner, smiling for the camera, posing in her wedding dress with her husband. Sighing, I took a seat next to him. He looked pleased. Is that her, you bastard? Never mind, I can see in your face that it's her. You really didn't know, did you? How does it feel? I hope it sucks as much for you as it does for me. We talked, and after 15 minutes, I let him go, pulled out the bottle of straight rye whiskey I'd bought earlier for the bar in my new house, and we proceeded to get drunk. I woke up to the sun hitting my face, and as I stood up, I saw him holding a .32 caliber pistol and looking at me. Fear coursed through me as he smirked. He put the gun in his toolbox. You're right, it's not a very good weapon, but I wouldn't want to be shot with one of those. And we talked again in the back of the truck. I apologized again and was surprised when he brushed me off. I always knew it would happen. Sooner or later, the age difference and the fact that we like the same things had to play a part. And then there's the fact that I'm away every weekend. She had plenty of time to play. Well, that explained her having free time. He worked as a trucker, specializing in dangerous goods best hauled on weekends and at night to avoid traffic jams. It paid well, but he wasn't home Thursday through Sunday. What are you going to do? He looked at me in surprise. Divorce her, of course. She's yours now, if you still want her. I drunkenly admitted my marriage proposal to him. I shrugged. How could I ever trust her? This is the second time something like this has happened to me. No, it's over between us. It hurts, but I know from experience that it can be gotten over. I drove him back to his car, reminding him to get his gun when he got out. Keep it. I don't think I need it to remind me that it could have gotten me killed. When he got in the car, I asked him again what he was going to do. You're in luck. You can just walk away. As for me, I'll have to get a divorce. It'll be simple, no guilt. You go your own way and leave me alone. There are no children, so there shouldn't be any problems. If that happens, contact her. Tell her you're going to accuse her of adultery and I'll act as a witness. It might make the case easier. He looked up in surprise and slowly held out his hand. I leaned out the truck window and shook it. Sorry, kid, he said, started the truck and drove off. I watched his taillights disappear. Me too, I said to the empty space and drove in the opposite direction. I walked up to my grandmother's house, got in the van, and drove off. I wasn't hiding from anyone, but I knew I needed to wait a little while before talking to her. Hitting a woman was out of character for me, but I didn't mind the verbal reprisal. I stopped and sent her an email. Melody, I'm not running away, but you really don't want to be around me right now. Don't look for me. I'm out of town and won't be until next weekend. I'm going to spend that time thinking about our relationship. You remember them, don't you? The one that was based on lies? Call me next weekend, and if I can contain my anger, I'll try to listen to everything you have to say. But don't expect me to believe much. She immediately sent me a short reply. Thank you for at least agreeing to give me a chance to talk. There's a lot you didn't know about me, and there's a lot I'd like to tell you. Unless you say otherwise, I'll be at your house next Saturday at 4 o'clock. And Jess, believe it or not, I love you. I had been thinking and pondering all week. My boys already understood a little bit of what was going on, so for the first few days they forgave me for acting like an outright moron. As Saturday approached, my sense of dread grew. At least she wasn't dressing up and trying to lure me into bed. I didn't let her walk into the kitchen, forcing her to sit across from me at the kitchen table she'd spent 2 weeks trying to pick out to be perfect. She started to speak, but I held up my hand. Ground rules. Don't tell me how much you love me. Don't waste our time with a bunch of apologies. Just explain to me. Why did you go to bars and date guys while you were married? Do you really think I can go on living my life wondering where you are while I'm working? You can get out of bed with someone else and, after showering and freshening up, meet me at home, dragging me into bed for a shot of sloppy seconds. Would you be able to live like that if you were interested? Tears came to her eyes, and she sobbed quietly for several minutes before she pulled herself together. The look on her face was complete. I've already lost you, haven't I? I didn't answer her anything. Then she squared her shoulders, looked me in the eyes, and started. It probably doesn't matter anymore, but I'm going to tell you anyway. I grew up in poverty, and the expression trailer park trash fits my childhood just right. My mom left when I was old enough to remember myself, so I was raised by my dad and 2 older sisters. I was born when both of my parents were in their 30s. My sisters were in their teens when I came into the world. My father was a complete alcoholic and never once professed his love for me in his entire life. She sighed, remembering. He eventually died of liver disease when I turned 18. My sisters had their own families by then. One married a second time, the other a third. So, as you can see, I didn't have what you might call good role models in my life. Then I met Jerry. I didn't love him, but I respected him, and I knew he would take care of me. I just knew that eventually it would grow into love. We were doing well until he got that job. I was bored and lonely. He talked me into going into the nursing program at the community college, just to have something to focus on. I don't think he expected me to graduate and continue my education until I became a registered nurse. But for the first time in my life, I had a purpose and a valuable skill. Working in the emergency room brought in the most money, so I took the job. It was stressful, demanding, and left me no time to think about how my life was turning out. Jerry was making good money, and I was saving most of my paycheck in the bank, intending to use it to make a down payment on a house. Everything was fine until they changed my work schedule. Now that he was home, I wasn't home. I had friends who would talk me out of staying home and go out drinking or dancing with them. I still wore my rings and no one touched me, but it got rid of the boredom. I know it doesn't matter now, but before I met you, I was planning on leaving Jerry. And then I fell in love, 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 and had to have you. The first time you kissed me, I realized it was over between Jerry and me. I still respected him, but I was never going to love him. So I hired a lawyer and started the paperwork. I took my time, even though I wanted to get to know you better. I had no desire to start a relationship with someone until I was sure. I don't expect you to believe me, but I'd never slept with anyone before you. You're only the second man I've been with, and that's the truth. She pulled out some papers. Look at the date. They should have been filed months ago. I just didn't know how to tell him, and the guilt was eating me alive. That's why I wanted to wait, honey. I may not be the best person since I slept with you and loved you while I was still married, but there's no way I would have taken your ring until I was a free woman. And I was going to tell you, and very soon. But I was going to wait until I moved out, and frankly, I was going to lie a little about the timing. She talked herself out of waiting. You know, I believe most of what you're telling me, Mel, but there are still some sore spots. For one thing, when you realized your feelings, you should have broken up right away. Instead, in my opinion, you stayed with Jerry as a backup plan in case I wasn't right for you. And you still slept with him even when you were sleeping with me. How do you explain that to yourself? Or to me? But the most important thing to me is that even if we're together, I still have to travel for work. What happens when you get lonely? Will you go out with your friends and maybe find yourself in the same situation again? Will I be like Jerry, hiding in parking lots to kill your new lover? As I spoke, her tears grew larger and larger. I let the air out of my lungs, trying to focus. It all comes down to trust, Mel. If I marry, it will only be to a woman I trust with all my heart and soul, who will always and always have our best interests at heart. And that's not who you are right now. Frankly, I doubt you ever will be. But I'll make you a deal. Get your divorce. Let some time pass, and then call me if you're still interested. Maybe we can start over. We'll see. That was it, the final act. It took her 10 minutes to get herself under control again. She wanted a kiss, but I refused. I put my arms around her and she pressed against me so tightly I thought I'd have bruises later. She pulled away, snorting. I understand, Jess, I really do. And even though you don't care about my promises right now, I'll tell you one thing. No matter if we get back together, you will never, ever find a woman who will love you more than I do. And one day, maybe many years from now, even if we're not together, I'll find a way to prove it to you. She turned and walked away without another word. We only spoke twice after that. I was too angry and she was too whiny to have a reasonable conversation, but she was determined to try. Eventually, she gave up direct communication and started emailing me once a week or so. She tried to be upbeat and talkative, but for at least 3 months, all emails ended with her pleading for another chance. I answered her occasionally if she broached some nervous subject. She wrote to me about going to therapy and how it was helping her a lot. She even talked Jerry into going with her twice, and her only comment was that it was educational. She started writing less often, maybe twice a month, and finally, after 7 months, stopped. I still have her last letter, and there is no way I can bring myself to delete it. My dear Jess, I know it annoys you when I use weasel words, but this will be my last communication with you, so I will say what I feel, even if you don't like it. I got my papers today. I'm officially a single woman again. The second best event of my life, I will always consider meeting you the first, was going to therapy. I found out who I really am. See, I shouldn't have married Jerry, but I was selfish and looking for a way out of my miserable life. I was too young, too immature, too stubborn to enter into an adult relationship. Oh, I did everything I wanted to do, but my heart was never truly engaged. Even without you, my marriage would have died sooner or later. I think inertia and fear kept me with him. My time with Dr. Chu taught me to put away my crutches and stand on my feet for the first time in my life. Jerry was shocked when I told him I didn't want any of our joint assets and sent him a check reimbursing him for my educational expenses. I owed him a lot and more. We didn't exactly part as friends, but I don't think he hates me that much now. It's kind of funny if you think about it. Remember those lies I told you about living with two other nurses and the no boyfriends rule? That's exactly how I live now, sharing a one-bedroom apartment with two other nurses. I'm fine with that, even though I'm independent now, but I don't think I can go home to an empty apartment. In honor of my divorce, I'm going to give you a gift. I'm going to let you go. Dr. Chu helped me realize that if I were you, I'd have a hard time trusting you. So I'm letting you go. I hope you have a good life and find a woman who will love you as much as I did and as much as I still do. Mel? I stared at the screen for a long time, my finger hovering over the delete button. I didn't want to read it again. It was too painful. Instead, I saved it. That's how I wandered aimlessly through life. If it weren't for work, I'd probably be completely lost. It was almost 10 months before I went on a date. It was a beautiful woman, the sister of a contractor with whom I had a lot of business. She was witty, articulate, and seemed to enjoy rubbing her whole body against me as we danced. I really enjoyed the evening, but at the end we both realized there was no spark between us. We went out 2 more times before she found someone else and we broke up. During that time, I saw Mel twice. Once, while sitting at a stoplight, I saw her through the window of a small bistro. She was with a group of women, smiling and chatting. I sat there so long that the guy sitting behind me honked for me to move away. Mel turned around at the noise and looked me straight in the eye when I pulled away. The next time we met was at a club. I was on my second date with Tina, and we had just sat down at a table when I noticed her sitting at the other end of the room with 4 friends. She must have felt the stares because she looked up and saw me. Time stopped while we looked at each other. About 30 seconds passed before she burst into tears and ran out of the club. Her friends ran after her, all except one who stopped at my table. Asshole, did you enjoy rubbing up against another woman? What's wrong with you? I was actually completely calm. Hello to you too, Gwen. I don't mean to belittle your point of view, but I don't rub it in anyone's face. It's been almost a year since Mal and I have been together. It's a pretty small town, we were bound to run into each other eventually. Tell her I'm sorry if I upset her, but it's time for her to move on. Good night, Gwen. I turned back to Tina, ignoring her. She stood like that for a few minutes, frowning, and then walked away, muttering asshole under her breath. Tina naturally wanted to know the whole story, so I told her. She looked at me and sighed. You can tell yourself it's over, but I saw the look on your face when you saw her. Even now, when we talk, you're watching the door like a hawk, waiting to see if she'll come back. And she still loves you. Why else would an ex make her cry after almost a year apart? You guys need to clear the air. I paid no attention to her comment. We dated for a while longer until she met someone she was interested in. Jerry started going to my cousin's bar. It gave us both the same opportunities. It was the only place Mel didn't go to anymore. He was a very nice guy. When he and I became friends, the guys started making fun of him for trying to kill me. I told them to back off. The truth was on his side. If he hadn't been so drunk, he would have been much more accurate and I would have been just a memory. One night, after a few beers, he suddenly asked me a question. Do you miss her? I knew who he was talking about. It was no use trying to mess with his head. Every day, he sighed. Me too, but not every day. Just every now and then, when I see mutual friends or drive by a place we like to visit. I've kept in touch with her over the years. You know, the other day I saw one of her nurse friends, one of the few I liked, and we talked for a few minutes. She said they call Melody a nun because she doesn't want to date. She blamed it on you, not me. Said you have spoiled her so much that she can't bear the thought of intimacy with another man. She also told me that she was in therapy, which I'm sure you already know. One of her assignments was to write a letter of apology to everyone she had offended. In her letter, she called it a demon cleansing. Do you have something like that? I admitted that I did, but didn't elaborate. Well, I kind of remember the good times too. And eventually she stood up, admitted her guilt. Hell, she even gave me back the money I spent on her nursing degree. I hope she finds someone else who treats her well. I hummed. Jerry had gotten lucky. The day his divorce became final, one of the dispatchers at his job asked him out. She was a few years older, a military widow with a 14-year-old boy and a 12-year-old girl. They were made for each other, shared the same views, the same beliefs, and he was great with her kids. He was even an assistant coach on the girls' softball team. He went so far as to talk me and my cousin into sponsoring them. We took half the bar, went to a few games, and cheered her on by name, much to her embarrassment. But the hug she gave him was genuine, and he looked so proud you could burst. We were already planning his bachelor party. I was happy for him and sad, watching the little girls play and wondering if I would ever be able to be in the stands cheering on my kid. My chances were getting slimmer and slimmer. I was 32. My clock was ticking. So I laid another stone by throwing myself into the business and growing it. However, there comes a point when you can saturate your market. I was taking on more work than we could handle, even after new masons came in. My grandmother and sister used to say to me to this effect, "Let someone else get the contract, Jess. Work with what we have. If you don't, our quality will drop, and that's the kiss of death in this field." Think of the Pope. Do you want his life's work to disappear? It made sense. I stopped taking on new work and even handed off a few small projects to competitors I was confident they could handle. I got my business back on track, but there was a hitch in my personal life. I ran into Becca back in college when she asked me to come in and offer me a job. She emailed me using her married name, so I was surprised when I saw her. She was a little fatter, but still attractive. In addition to being very successful in her career, by her own admission, she had a successful marriage. According to Becky, he was a handsome man with 7 zeros. She held his hand while telling him about it, and he wasn't embarrassed in the slightest. He was probably about 10 years older, and they had just had their first child. Everything they wanted had been thought out in detail, including a small stone house meant for play. She wanted it to be built like the Scottish shepherd's cottage she had seen when they were on their honeymoon. We talked, and I agreed to take the contract if I could fulfill it on my own schedule. I took 2 journeymen and 1 foreman and set about erecting boundary and private walls. I did all the preliminary work, laid the lines, selected the stones. She wanted local fieldstone, which was difficult as there were no local suppliers. I was lucky. I bought some existing walls on the estate and carefully marked each stone so that I could assemble them later on the new site. There was also a stone chimney on the property, the last remnant of the original house. I walked over and looked at it and saw an example of the finest masonry. Every stone, right down to the flagstone hearth, was perfectly shaped. It impressed me so much that I asked Becca to come and inspect it, explaining my idea. She immediately agreed. I built her a stone patio with a fireplace in the center, with half walls tapering upward so the heat would reflect onto the seating area. It was the perfect spot for cool fall evenings. Years later, she sent me a picture of her 3 children and their friends sitting in front of the fireplace roasting marshmallows, with snow falling all around. An unexpected bonus came when I took apart the fireplace and discovered a stash under the largest hearthstone. It was a fairly common practice at the time, the only logical way to store valuables. Fire was much more dangerous in those days. There lay a wooden cigar box containing a half-full bottle of whiskey, preserved by being stored cork down, 2 love letters from the 1870s, and a wedding ring. A small bag contained 2 silver dollars and other change. The letters were from his sweetheart for whom he had bought the ring, but who had died in a fire before they were married. Technically, the ring belonged to me since I bought it, but I gave it to the heirs who fought over it for a while, and then gave it to the local historical society. They wrote about it in the papers, and there was a wave of hearth excavations all over the area. If anyone found anything, it was only in silence. After I finished the project, Becca invited me to a party to show off my work. I went, mostly for business reasons. After all, most of their friends were pretty well off. I made a few acquaintances and ended up sitting with Becca as the party was winding down. I still hang out with her from time to time, she said sharply. I realized she was talking about Cindy. I hadn't thought of her in years. Without asking me, she pulled some pictures out of her phone. Cindy had cut her hair much shorter than she had in college and had gained probably 30 pounds. It didn't look too bad on her tall figure, but the tone I remembered was long gone. In one of the pictures, she was standing next to a man who was a couple inches shorter. They had their arms around each other and were smiling at the camera. Her second husband, Becca said. The first one was a total loser because they both had affairs. She met David a year later when he brought a client to her. They ended up having coffee and then had a date that led down the aisle. She was also in therapy and told him the whole truth about you, her first husband, and how she didn't think she was a good wife. After a long engagement, he convinced her that he was willing to take a risk and trust her because he had no choice. He just couldn't imagine life without her. They eloped the next day. It's been just under 2 years and they are inseparable. I believe she'll make it work this time. I think I surprised her when I told her I was happy for her. I thought about it later and decided that I really was happy for her. It had obviously taken her years to get in shape and I hoped it was worth it. As for me, I stopped dating, trying to figure myself out. I couldn't afford to get into a relationship with anyone when Melody's ghost still loomed before my eyes. Out of whimsy, I sent her an email. I just want you to know that I wasn't trying to make some kind of statement when I saw you at the club. I had no intention of hurting you or making you feel uncomfortable. It was pure accident. I had no idea you were there. If it's any consolation, my evening was ruined too. Jess? She replied to me the next day, I'm sorry I ruined your evening. I had no right to do that. I know it's over between us. I know we'll never be together. I just can't stop loving you. I've given up trying. Time is supposed to heal you, but all it does is make me miss you even more. I got an offer from another hospital that is far enough away that I won't run into you. I think I'm going to take the job and start fresh. Maybe then I'll be cured. I really do wish you happiness, Mel. P.S. If you ever want to talk, just text. I inquired. We didn't see each other that often, but if moving would help her, I'd be all for it. Maybe then one of us would be happy. And here we were, swaying to the music. The feeling was disturbingly familiar and yet completely different. Jerry bribed the orchestra, and they played 3 slow songs in a row. I would have stopped after the first one, but she wouldn't let me go. I wondered if I should make her, but I didn't. When they finally ended, she clutched at my arm. Will you sit with me for a while? Please? If I have to, I'll get on my knees and beg. The thought of her embarrassing us both made me agree. She led me to a small table at the back of the room, far enough away from the group that we could talk. She tried to make small talk, and I let her chat for a minute before I stopped her. What are you really trying to say, Mel? Stop beating around the bush and say it straight out. She hung her head for a second and then looked up at me. I'd never seen a more determined expression on her face. I can answer that question in one word. You. I want you back. I've tried, Jess, really, really tried. But I can't let you go. I can't forget about you. I can't stop loving you. I can see it in your eyes. You still care about me. I know you're not dating. My friends tell me that every time they see me. Why? You have everything. Good looks, good values, great job, bright future. I bet you've been courted a lot since we broke up. You could have had your pick, but you blew them all off. I think I know why. I can tell you why I didn't find anyone else. First of all, I didn't want anyone else. I thought about dating a couple times, but I looked at them and wondered how they'd compare to you and turned them down. I never stopped loving you. I didn't even pretend to try. Why don't we start over? I think you'll find me very different than I was before. I'm begging you, just give me one chance. Take me on one date, and if I feel it's wrong, I'll never bother you again. Think about it and call me. My number's still the same. Thanks for listening, and thanks for the dance. It means a lot to me. She jumped up and kissed me on the cheek and then walked away. I watched her talk to Jerry and Anna, hug them both, and then disappear out the door. Jerry came over and sat down. Well? Well, what? Don't act like an idiot. Are you going to give her another chance? You have to. You deserve it. I looked at him like he'd just turned green and spoken a foreign language. He only sighed. That's up to you. There's one more thing I wanted to tell you. Since the day she met you, she hasn't had anything else with me. She apologized for that in her letter. She said she contracted something at work and that it would be 6 months before she could do it again, and she needed to get tested to make sure she was free of the disease. I should have been angry about that, but by the time she told me, I had forgotten about it. I guess deep down I never loved her either. Not the way I should have. Now go ahead and congratulate us one more time before we leave. Niagara Falls, can you believe it? I wanted somewhere warm, and she wanted it. I have a feeling that whatever Anna wants, she'll get it. She wanted me, and she got me. She's the one who insisted I bring you both here. She can be very persuasive. I like that. I thought about it for about 2 weeks. A neighboring town used to have concerts on the lawn of the old courthouse on Fridays in the summer. Blues, folk, rock, and country to lighten things up. That weekend, a blues duo, a man and a woman, with the catchy name Freeman Feelbad Jr. and Sweet Thing, were performing. I had heard them before, and they were very good. I called Mel and asked if she wanted to attend. There was a long silence. I thought she had hung up, then I heard a quiet yes that sounded like a sob, and she left. It seemed like a safe choice. Surrounded by a lot of people, there was no chance of getting in too deep somewhere. I didn't even bother picking her up. We met at the playground. I got there early and picked a good spot, setting up chairs in advance. She showed up exactly at the appointed time at the place where we agreed to meet. She didn't notice me at first, and I stared at her for a while. She was wearing a pale yellow sundress, her long curls glistening against the setting sun. The sight took my breath away. Her smile blossomed when she saw me. She rushed toward me, about to hug me, but stopped. Instead, she timidly touched my hand. We walked around the square until the show started, window shopping and people watching. I bought 2 glasses of red wine, which I knew she liked, to sip while we listened. The duo was very good, professional. The guy was older, in his early 40s, and she looked to be a little over 30. Their voices blended very well, and he was a slide virtuoso. Their shorthand between songs was humorous, and there was something for everyone in their selection of songs. We laughed at the humorous ones, but when the guy belted out a song about a woman cheating on him, you could hear the pain in his voice. Mel tensed up and looked at me, blushing. The next song, a duet about rekindling a romantic relationship, brought a smile to her face. By 9, the concert was over. She stood while I cleaned up the chairs and looked at me longingly. Thanks for the evening, Jess. It's not over yet, unless you don't want it to end. I'm starving. Do you want to eat pizza at Yanni's? Tears glistened as she took my hand. It was one of our favorite restaurants when we were together. Yanni's was located on the square and offered Greek and Italian cuisine. On concert nights, they stayed open an extra hour and did a good business. I did the stonework in his outdoor dining area. Yanni personally served us without even letting us order. Ah, young lovers. I'm afraid you've forgotten your old friend. It's good to see you again. 1 pizza from Yanni's, right away. A large pizza, half of which was topped with anchovies, mine, and the other half with mushrooms, hers. We ate and put the leftovers in a box. I walked her to her car. Thanks for the evening, Mel. I had fun. She had been holding my hand since we left the restaurant. Before I could say anything else, she hugged me tightly, kissed me on the cheek, and hopped into the car. I stood and watched her taillights disappear and wondered what it all meant. We went out 2 more times, to a silly romantic movie that gave her an excuse to take my hand and snuggle up to me while she sniffled. Then we spent the day at the local fair. She made me walk with her through all the exhibits, admiring the canned goods and baked goods, laughing at the exotic vegetables. She froze in front of a huge display case of quilts, a dozen or more, from traditional to contemporary, all works of fabric art. Tears came to my eyes again and a memory came over me. One evening as we were getting cozy in my new home, she showed me a picture of a quilt in one of her magazines. I've always wanted to learn how to do that. Why? Because, silly me, I want to be able to sew all the kids their own personal quilt, something durable that they can pass on to their children and those children to our great-grandchildren. Yeah, she realized what she'd said and looked at me nervously. I grinned. How many blankets are we talking about? She smiled, glad I wasn't angry. Oh, at least 3. Maybe more if you're lucky. She laughed, seeing the stunned look on my face, and sat back down at her desk, flipping through the pages again. Back to the present, I said nothing, but took her hand and squeezed it gently, grabbing the card in front of the display and putting it in my pocket. Busy Needle Quilting Club. Join us and learn the art of quilt making. We have classes, workshops, and soon you'll be sewing with confidence. Plus, she has a birthday coming up. I thought this would be the perfect gift. The candy will be eaten, the flowers will fade, but the new skill will stay with you forever. We went on rides, at least the ones she could get me on. I watched her ride the scarier ones myself. I mean, everybody's afraid of something, right? She thought it was funny that a battle-hardened veteran was afraid of little old roller coasters. She had her own fears, chief among them being thunderstorms. When she was 6 years old, she was almost struck by lightning. It had struck the ground 10 feet away from her, rendering her and her friends unconscious. Now she stayed inside, away from the windows, and shook until it was over. The fact that I held her in my arms helped a little. We had our first kiss, sitting and watching the fireworks that we set off every night while the fair was going on, pressed against each other in the bleachers of the arena. It just happened. Neither of us planned it. She said something, and when I turned to respond, our lips seemed to lock together on their own. It seemed to last for hours, but it was probably only 10 or 15 seconds. We pulled away and looked at each other, amazement written on both of our faces. We didn't say a word to each other for the rest of the evening, and when I drove her home, she just walked out and into the house. We hadn't seen each other for almost 3 weeks. We weren't avoiding each other, I was still trying to catch up on work. We were behind schedule again due to the weather, and it took us that long to catch up. We talked on the phone a few times, but she seemed distant. I began to wonder if the kiss was a mistake. I called home and informed my family that I had finished the project and intended to be home by Thursday. They seemed to breathe a sigh of relief, but worried that I was working too hard and it was wearing me out. I sighed and tossed the bag of dirty laundry into the foyer. I'll wash them later. I wanted to shower first, and in the most horrible way possible. The only change I'd made since I bought the apartment was remodeling the bathroom. It got bigger, and the shower had enough room for 4 people. It had 6 jets that could be turned on simultaneously, individually, or in any combination of your choice, full flow, massage pulses, or gentle mist. When I ordered it, my first thought was how Mel would like it. It wasn't finished until 2 weeks after we broke up. When you live alone, especially if you've lived alone for a while, you don't usually think about how you're dressed when you go out. I thought I heard a giggle. It was Mel sitting on the bed. What, how, why? A smile spread across her face. What? It's because your mom told me you'd be home tonight. How? You didn't make me hand over my keys, and why? Because I have something to tell you. Now get dressed and meet me in the living room. She staggered out of the bedroom, felt me watching her, looked over her shoulder and grinned. Here's another thought. You stay as you are and I'll join you. The thought made me jump to my feet. No, I hissed. I'll be out in a second. I grabbed my shorts and t-shirt, wanting to relax. It took a few minutes. When I came out, she was sitting in the rocking chair looking out into the backyard. Turning to me, she gave me her beautiful smile. I have something to tell you, and I want you not to interrupt me. I want to tell you everything before my nerves give out, please? I nodded, sinking down onto the sectional couch she'd insisted on putting in. I'd already considered changing the furniture when we parted ways, but it fit the room well and was comfortable. I preferred to sit in the chair most of the time. Every time I sat down on the couch, images of us hugging or making love flashed through my mind, and eventually, I started to move. I know that the last few times we've talked, I've been out of sorts. It reminded me of what I've lost, of what I want back. I want you back. I want you to chase me around the house like you used to until I get tired of playing and let you catch me. I want to take the air mattress out to the backyard, lie on it like we used to, look up at the stars, snuggling against each other, and then make love. I want you to love me again. She paused, gathering her thoughts. I started to speak, but she held up her hand. Wait, I'm almost done. And then I realized something. You already love me. I know it. You know it. Everyone we know knows it. Love isn't our problem. It's trust. I lied to you in the worst possible way. It took some time, but now I realize how much I hurt you. So I had to find a way to regain your trust. Here's what I came up with. Let me move back in. You've got security cameras, add them. Wire up the whole house. That way, while you're gone, you can access the footage and find out what I'm up to. Put a GPS tracker on my car and you'll know where I am and where I've been. I did a little research on the internet. We can buy a personal tracker like those ankle thingies that criminals wear. This model is a bracelet. Again, you'll be able to know where I am at any time. She lowered her eyes and a deep blush appeared on her face. If that's not enough, I'll wear a chastity belt. They make them, I've checked. You'll be able to lock me up when you leave and release me when you get home. I'll do all this just to prove you can trust me. Wow. Obviously, Mel had thought this through carefully. Unfortunately, she missed one thing. I explained things to her as gently as possible. First, let me thank you for thinking about how we can be together again, for being willing to do all the things you described. But it's never going to work. Tears came to my eyes, and I held up my hand as she tried to speak. It's my turn now. Hear me out. All the things you want to do are things you shouldn't do. If we did them, you wouldn't be a partner in a relationship but a slave. While some of them sound fun from a playful perspective, you can't live with that all the time. Oh, I'm sure you'd try, but sooner or later you'd start to resent it. I know I would start to. All this stuff doesn't foster trust, just the opposite. If I have to put in so much effort, it only reinforces the idea that you can't be trusted. I can't live like this. Deep down, you know all of this. The tears flowed freely. She stood up and crawled toward the door. I caught her and pulled her to me on the couch. She buried her head in my shoulder and cried for a few minutes. So it's over then? Quite the opposite, baby. I think it's just beginning. What you did today, what you were willing to do, takes a lot of courage. That's what makes me think we can make it work. So let's take our time and build on what we've done, okay? She lifted her head and smiled. She reminded me of the sun peeking out after a big thunderstorm. Really? Yes, honey, really. The next morning, I was going to take her to breakfast and then to her apartment to get clothes. She was working double shifts today to help out a friend. Then she was going back to the house for the weekend. I met her roommates and understood why she said she was thinking about moving. Amanda was a tall blonde, decent looking, but she couldn't compare to Melody. She'd been married twice, divorced twice, and both times the reason was infidelity. The last time she'd had a woman, she'd had a bit of a crush on Mello. Beth was red-haired and attractive, if she smiled at all. She hadn't cheated on her husband, but she had anger issues. He put off the wedding until she got help and she lied to him, telling him she had gone through an anger management program. After the wedding, she turned into what her ex described as a screaming bitch that the devil must have kicked out of hell because even he couldn't stand her. He'd gone down the path of irreconcilable differences because it was the easiest way, and in this case, the right way. She was surprised, though he had begged her to seek help right up until the day he filed the papers. She didn't take it well, and ended up getting a restraining order requiring her to stay 500 feet away from him at all times. She went through this twice before the judge got fed up with it and put her in jail for the weekend. She begged for counseling, got it, but after 3 sessions of listening to her scream, the counselor recommended divorce. It was sad, and he promised that he would stop the divorce if she sought help. Of course, she didn't seek help. No. Her idea of revenge was to have these with anything that moved and tell him about it. By then, he didn't care anymore because he had met someone else. The funny thing is, she's in therapy now because the hospital told her it was either that or unemployment. No one wants a nurse with the kind of attitude she has towards patients. They didn't hesitate for a second. As soon as Mel closed the door, they pounced on me like rabid hyenas. So you're the guy who messed with her head like that. I know your kind. You can't or won't forgive. Your precious pride won't let you. You'll end up making her jump through hoops until you're sick of her, and you'll dump her again. Asshole. I know my mouth was open. I'd never seen anyone spew venom like that. She must have had a day where she could spew it on someone. I mentally marked that I would never turn my back on Beth. Amanda wasn't any better. If you hurt her, I swear to God, it'll be the last thing you do. She deserves better. She deserves to find someone who can love her right, not some asshole who will lord it over her for the rest of her life, because she made a mistake. She probably would have said more, but I'd already heard enough. My good mood had long since faded. Listen, bitches. First of all, this has nothing to do with Mel and me. And if you think you're the one who ends up with her, think again. Mel's trying to be tolerant. But you getting to sleep with her is about the same as me ever liking you. It's not going to happen in this lifetime. I turned to Beth. And you. Amanda, I can understand. A little. She's in love. Or maybe just deeply lustful. You have no excuses. You just don't want anyone to be happy. Period. Your husband should be a saint for putting up with your shit for as long as he did. I was on a roll. In retrospect, I can say that maybe I should have been a little quieter, but it felt good to vent my emotions, especially on bitches you don't care about. So screw you both. I'm not the least bit interested in your luggage. Right now, we need to deal with our own past. Don't expect an invitation if we decide to get married. You'd better come, of course, but seeing your face when I say my vows will be just fine. Mel caught the last moment of our exchange and stared at it like a deer caught in the headlights. Amanda noticed her and immediately stared back at her. I hope you were listening, Mel. This guy isn't going to bring you back. He's just messing with you, waiting for you to calm down before he lets the hammer go. I've met guys like that before, honey. Notice he says if a lot. My second husband was just like him, too proud to forgive a mistake. Let me tell you right off the bat, asshole, pride is not going to love you back, give you kisses, and hug you when you feel bad. At this point, I was beyond furious. Really, Amanda, really. Pride won't let you do those things, but pride will allow you to look at yourself in the morning, confident that you are true to your beliefs. Pride will also allow you to walk down the street and make eye contact with other people for the same reason. I have often thought that the old saying about pride is wrong. Pride doesn't precede a fall, it comes after it. When you find yourself in the mud and everything you wanted, everything you believed in, and everything you loved has been taken from you, pride will lift you up. Pride will force you to live up to your principles. It may not allow you to sleep at night, but it will make you realize that insomnia is quite tolerable. Now, however interesting this conversation may be, Mel is ready, and we are going. I took her hand and pulled her out the door. Never in my life had I been so excited to leave a place. On the way to the car, Mel was silent. When we got home, she put the suitcase in the trunk instead of carrying it. I was confused. Mel, honey, let's get your suitcase into the house. You don't need to drive around town with it. There's a chance it will be stolen. It'll be here when you get here tonight. She didn't look me in the eye. I think I'll pass. I'll be really tired, so I'll probably just go home and crash in bed. I need to think without distractions. That hit me hard. What's wrong, Mel? 3 hours ago, you were whining about wanting to volunteer and regretting it. You even tried to ask someone to fill in for you. And now, because of the rantings of several seriously horny women, and after yesterday and this morning, you don't want to spend time with me? Fine. Find someone else. But be careful. I learned to live without you once. If you start being passive and aggressive with me now, it'll be the last straw. And before you go, I'd like my key back. I think she realized then that she had made a serious mistake and tried to correct it, but I was far from being as reasonable. To hell with all that. After we're finally reunited, will she want to come back? She's done. I'm done with her. I'm doing just fine without her. Of course you don't. I missed her more than I had before we broke up the first time, and I was angry at myself for letting myself believe it. I was comforted by my work. You have to be careful when you're working with big rocks. That's what my broken fingers had taught me. So I worked, trying to make up for lost time until the cold weather came. I hadn't been home for 3 weeks and only took one day off to do laundry and check on the house. I was a little surprised when I saw her car in my driveway. I was even more surprised when Mel ran out of the house and pounced on me, knocking us both to the ground. She had a death grip on me and was mumbling incoherently. She was pretty strong, but she didn't lift rocks for a living. I got tired of being gentle, so I took her hands and forced them back until they were behind her back. Shut up! I had never raised my voice at her before, and it shocked her, silencing her. I took advantage of this and stood up, leaving her on the ground. I left her lying on the ground whimpering like a wounded animal, determined to leave her there. I was about to close the door when her whimpering turned into a scream. Even though I wanted nothing to do with her, I couldn't stand the sound of her pain. I went back and tried to pick her up, but she refused to move. Then I took her in my arms and headed for the door. Her arms wrapped around my neck as the tears flowed, and she nuzzled into my neck. I lowered her to the couch not very gently and went to get some water. Drink? I said, sitting her up straight. She drank the water and stared at me with her huge eyes. How did you get here? I asked when she fell silent. She started to speak, but incoherently. I raised my hand and she stopped instantly. I'll try again. Answer in simple words. Take your time. And be truthful. One lie, and I will never speak to you again. Begin. She lowered her head and spoke so quietly that I almost asked her to speak louder. I broke the window. I replaced it right away. I knew where you kept the spare keys and I used them. That night I came home after my shift was over, had a terrible fight with Amanda and Beth, and they kicked me out. I could have gone to a motel, but I ran here like a wounded animal. Because I was a wounded animal, destroyed by my own actions. I just wanted to be near you, to beg you to help me get your love back. You weren't here, and you didn't respond to the texts, messages, and emails I left for you. I felt safe here, so I stayed and waited for you to come home. If you want me to leave, I'll leave. She looked utterly destroyed. Kicking her out would be like beating a puppy. Well, not right now. I still have some things to think about, and for that I'm going to need your help. Order a pizza, I'm starving. I'll be back after my shower. Her eyes lit up with hope, but my gaze dimmed it a bit. When I stepped out of the shower dressed in sweatpants, I noticed she was fresher, minimal makeup, hair neatly tied back in a ponytail. She looked younger that way. I was saved from the conversation by the appearance of a pizza, which Mel grabbed and dragged into the kitchen. By the time I paid, she'd already set the table, and there was a glass of wine next to the plate. I handed the wine back. Water will suffice for now. I want to have a clear head for later. She nodded, poured us both a glass each, and left the wine. I paid attention to the way she ate, taking bites and glancing at me from time to time. She seemed a little slimmer than I remembered. Are you on a diet? She shook her head. Just haven't felt like eating lately. I nodded and ate another slice of pizza, pondering while I ate. I really didn't know what to do. We were a pretty messed up pair of human beings. We finished up, she cleaned up a bit, and we sat down in the living room to talk. I noticed that she was disappointed that I didn't sit next to her, but chose to sit in the chair across from her. Tell me the truth, Mel. I know you want us to be together again. I want us to be together again. But how? How can I trust you? What can you say or do to get us back to where we were before everything fell apart? Suggestions? She did have a plan. Couples counseling. Pam at work told me about it. She was having a bad time with her boyfriend just before they were going to get married, and they went there to see if they could save their love. According to her, it worked wonders in making them both realize that they were not ready for married life. They postponed their wedding for a year, but she says the wait was worth it because when she walked down the aisle and met him at the altar, they were both sure that this was the path they were meant to walk down. I even get a discount because of my work. Would you consider it? I think it's the only way to overcome what I've done. I want to try it and I'm begging you. There's a chance we'll realize we'll never be together, but I'm willing to accept that. This half-life is killing me. Please promise me you'll think about it. I could tell it had cost her a lot of effort to make that little speech, and I promised her I'd think about it. She nodded, looking half hopeful. She got up and I heard her rummaging around in the bedroom. A few minutes later, she came out dragging her suitcase behind her. Will you help me load it into the car? Well, the hell with it. She sits in my house, begs me to go to couples counseling with her, and then runs off again? Where are you going? Mel looked surprised. To a motel, I guess. I know you don't want me here right now. I think I'll look for an apartment next week. I picked up the suitcase, surprised at its weight. Instead of heading for the door, I carried it into the bedroom, threw it on the bed, and started unpacking. She followed me and watched silently, then asked in a timid voice what I was doing. Putting your clothes in their places. Now, do you want to help me? I can do without you if I need to, but I can't put things where you want them. I picked up one of her thongs and twirled it in my hands. Suddenly shy, she snatched it from me. Here's the thing, she said through her tears. I'll clean them and put them on, but you have to take them off as often as possible. I had never seen a woman cry and smile at the same time. Her face contorted with all sorts of expressions. I agree, I said softly, but there will be some rules. I think I'll have some wine. Would you like your glass? She nodded, her hair falling over her eyes. 10 minutes later, she pressed herself against me and took the wine. Mel was silent for a few minutes, savoring the wine and the moment. Finally, in a voice so quiet I almost didn't hear it, she whispered, "Rules?" "Yes, Mel, the rules. I'd like to say we'll make it work, but until we solve our problems, I'm not sure. You'll continue to live with me. You can sleep in my bed if you want. We won't get better if we're apart. Make an appointment for counseling as soon as possible. Email me the dates, but please try to schedule them for Friday night so I can work." "I want to try, Mel. You know I love you more than anything in the world, but I need to know in my heart that I can trust you completely in the future. And if for some reason one of us decides it's not going to work out, we'll tell the other one right away." "Agreed." I expected her to lash out at me, but she said nothing, sipping her wine. I was about to speak again when Mel spoke up. "Yes, from the bottom of my heart. And I'm going to sleep in our bed. Where else am I going to sleep? In return, I want a few things from you. I want you to relax enough to spend more than one day with me. I want your absolute promise that unless there is a natural disaster or cataclysmic event, you will attend all sessions. Promise me." I was about to reply when she raised her hand. "And one more thing. I want you to try to think of a way I can prove how much I love you and that I will always be faithful to you. Whatever it is, I'll do it. But I have my doubts. Maybe sometime in the future, I'll ask you to do the same. Deal?" "Deal," I said. We didn't make love that night. It felt wrong somehow. I lay awake wondering if we were on the right path to happiness. I justified my words. On Fridays, I worked half days or no work at all, so I could be home during my sessions. The counselor was a man, which surprised me. I would have bet good money that she would choose a woman. As it turned out, she chose him because he had the highest success rate in helping couples work through their problems than anyone else in his practice. I liked this guy. He was calm, relaxed, and told me he liked to keep the drama to a minimum. Before heading out together, we had one session each. At each one, he asked what outcome we were hoping for. Our answers were very similar. He was calm, but not drawn out, and often Mel would cry before the session was over. I didn't cry, but he pushed my buttons skillfully enough to make me want to punch him a couple times. He got Mel to confess what I suspected. She'd stayed with Jerry, especially early in our relationship, as a security blanket in case I turned out not to be who I thought I was. When she realized she wanted me, she started divorce proceedings but didn't file for divorce. She reasoned that until I proposed to her, she wasn't sure how I felt. I said that was nonsense, and the counselor agreed with me. "Is that really true, Melanie? In the 6 months you were dating, especially after you started staying with him on weekends, you weren't sure he loved you. Even if you denied your ex-sex while you were dating Jesse, you still shared a bed, still cuddled, exchanged caresses. And when he left, you did the same thing with Jesse. Yes, you divorced, but only after you were caught." She almost shouted out her answer, surprising us both. "You think I don't know what I did? I betrayed them both, and I ruined every chance of happiness I ever had." She calmed down a little and snorted. "I don't think that's necessarily true, Melanie, or you two wouldn't be here right now. However, I do think that we've gone as far as we can in these sessions." We both looked at him in surprise. "But we're not healed yet," Melanie exclaimed. "No, we're not healed. But with my help, you've come as far as you can go. You both obviously still love each other deeply. That was easy to determine. You want to stay together to find the happiness you both desperately desire. That goes without saying. It all comes down to trust. Can Jesse trust you? I hope he does. Does he trust you now? No, it's the same as with you. You're not sure he can get over what you did and that at some point he may want revenge. You both need to decide soon if the work and pain you are going through is worth it to solve your problems. I can't do that. I don't have a magic wand to wave and declare you healed. I can only wish you luck and say this. I think if you can find grace in each other, you will never regret it. And if you can't, you need to accept the loss and walk away. I wish you all the luck in the world." We found ourselves outside his office and looked at each other in surprise. Melanie said, "What do we do next?" I didn't have an answer. For 3 months, we tried to move forward. We would have days of happiness, and then something would trigger in one of us and life would get stressful for a day or so. We would quickly become frustrated and cracks would appear. I thought of her often when I was at work. She would call me every night, which I looked forward to, and then send pictures from our house proving she was there. It was getting tiresome fast. Enough. I said to her one night. Stop sending me pictures, and stop locking yourself in the house every night. It's driving us both crazy. Get out of the house once in a while, go out to dinner with friends, even out for drinks with people you work with. I will assume you are an adult who has made a mistake and learned from it. If I don't, it won't matter anymore, will it? I think she got the point. A few days later, she went to the movies with her best friend. She liked horror movies, which I had absolutely no interest in. And she called me the next night to tell me how much fun she'd had before moving on to a serious relationship. Thank you, honey, for loving me and trusting me. I love, she gasped, pausing. It felt good. I even teased her, telling her I was glad I didn't have to drag myself to lame movies anymore. Her earlier attitude showed through. They don't suck. They're an entire art form that a caveman like you just can't comprehend. Despite your feeble intellect, I still love you. Good night, sweetheart. No, but no matter how hard I tried, she knew something was holding me back. In the last week or so, she had become quiet, and I realized that this could be the beginning of the end. Oddly enough, things worked out just fine at the flea market. Mel loved the smell of incense, and there were little burners set up all over the house. Most of the smells were pleasant enough, so I tolerated it. There was a booth run by a woman who looked like a poor man's version of the voodoo queen who had literally hundreds of scents. Mel was running low and asked me to take her along. We both loved it and often spent hours at a time in the store. We actually bought very little, but every now and then we stumbled upon treasures, at least in our opinion. I watched her flutter back and forth, willowy grace personified, smiling, occasionally raising her wand to her nose. She sensed I was watching her, raised her head, and smiled, the familiar, joyful smile I loved so much. Then her eyes clouded over and she lowered her gaze in sadness. At that very moment, I realized that if I didn't change, I would soon lose her. It was the end of summer, and as we were leaving, one of those quick, seasonal thunderstorms with wind and lightning that go away as quickly as they come, there was the first rumble of thunder and Mel jumped slightly. I instinctively put my arms around her, reassuring her. Luckily, we were inside, in one of the many halls that seemed to stretch on endlessly. We got there late and they were already starting to close. Wait here, honey. I'll get the truck and drive up to the door. I jogged to the parking lot and was soaked almost instantly. I thought intensely as I waited for my turn to pull up to the door, almost praying to overcome my blockage and love her like I was supposed to. As I pulled up to the house, a song I'd always loved came on the radio station I'd been half listening to. Slow dancing, swaying to the music, slow dancing, just me and my girl, came from the speakers. I looked toward the entrance, trying to get a glimpse of Mel, and I guessed from the bumper sticker on a small van parked nearby that it belonged to an incense seller. There were many stickers on the van, but the one that caught my eye made goosebumps run down my spine. Life isn't about hiding from the storm, it's about learning to love dancing in the rain. I get it. A great way to prove to me that Mel loved me. I opened the door and turned up the volume. I stood in the pouring rain while lightning flashed and held out my hand. I get it, sweetheart. If you really love me, I mean really, really love me, you'll come outside and dance with me. This is our last chance. Please, please, let's dance. I was almost shouting to be heard. Everyone was looking at her, wondering what she would do. I know she couldn't see them in the rain, but tears were running down my cheeks. She was sneaking toward the door, flinching at every flash, and I stood holding her hand, 3 feet away from her. Mel stared into my eyes, trying to see if I was sincere. She must have gotten the answer she wanted to get. The song ended after about 90 seconds, and I lifted her in my arms and put her in the car. Yes, the song was short, but it said everything that needed to be said. She loved me enough to come face to face with her greatest fear to prove it. What could be a better demonstration? We sat in the parking lot, wiping each other with dashboard wipes, laughing and crying together. Then we drove home and made love. And it was complete, utter love. 9 months later. I felt weak looking at him. The newest, steepest, scariest roller coaster on the planet. There were loops and turns and a steep descent from a height of 325 feet. But I had to do it, so I held her hand tightly as we stood at the ready to buckle up. A week later, after a slow dance in the rain, she told me that one day she would ask me to do something in return to show my absolute love for her. I instantly agreed, and this is the result. The coaster was designed like a bullet and the seat was single lane. She let me go first, holding my hand while I buckled in and secured myself. Then I felt horror as she let go of me and stepped back. "You're not coming with me?" For some reason, she smirked and cried at the same time. "I can't." "Why the hell not?" I almost shouted as the ride roared forward and picked up speed. Rule number 3. I read the rules as I passed them. Rule 1. You must be 48 inches tall to ride this ride. Rule 2. People with heart or other medical conditions should not ride this ride. Rule 3. Pregnant women are not allowed on this ride. Wait a minute. What? Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Subscribe to my channel and watch for the next video.